Today I want to talk about these. They are reference code 4880-160. They are really fine, quite long jawed parallel pliers from Maun. They are really good. At first I knew they'd be good for something because they're so fine. So these are really useful because they have that straight jaw that's really fine. So they're perfect for things like bending a piece of sheet into a quality that's more likely for the size of a stone. The other ones that I suppose would be closest for them in the Maun range would be the standard snipe nose ones. Now the difference that you've got is that these are tapered, so if you wanted to get a nice 90-degree fold in a piece of metal, you'd have to be holding these off at an angle, which then increases the width of where the plier is holding onto. To simplify it, if you're holding them to try and get the angle straight on this side, the 90-degree for the bend, you're going to have to take into consideration the lean that you've got in where the plier is holding it. Whereas with these, because they're so fine and they're 90 degrees, you don't, well, they're not tapered up, you don't have to lean these at all. They're just dead straight. So the width of the piece of metal that you're holding can be, well, just under 3mm, which is very useful when you're making things like collets and generally just bending sheet metal into a nice square 90-degree angle. So they're really useful for that. What I actually use them for most is when you melt up your gold or your silver or precious metals, melt it in a crucible and pour it into a skillet. Now when you pour the metal into a skillet, you're going to end up with borax left from the melt on top of your little ingot that you've poured. It's also recommended that you forge out your ingot, your rough ingot, to compress the metal a bit before you're putting it through the rolling mills. Now these are perfect for that because I do a lot of remodeling of jewellery, so using people's precious metal, there's not always a lot. And I suppose as well, with the price of precious metals at the moment, you can't have a lot left over. So that means sometimes you might be making a ring out of an ingot that's, an inch long and 5mm wide. So trying to hold that whilst forging it is really difficult. And that's where I use these on a regular basis, because they've got this stepped in section here. So this is what I was talking about. All of this rough surface is where the metal hasn't sort of been all compacted and everything. It's just sort of sat on top of each other on like a molecular scale. So what I would do, or what I do, what I use these for on a regular basis, is hold the ingot in there, and then I rest the pliers in that gap, and it gives me a really nice sort of strength to hold the piece with clearance at the top, so that when I hit that down with my big hammer, it clears the pliers. So there's no damage to the pliers, but it's just really good for that. I don't know if that's what they were made for. I'm presuming it probably wasn't, but that is what I use them for continuously. Everything that I melt up, I knock down, and I smash off the borax as well. So yeah, they're brilliant for that. They have a longer handle than the others, which at first maybe put me off a little bit because I don't have big hands. So in comparison, it doesn't look that bad in the photo, but if you're working from the pivoting point, they are quite considerably larger. if you were using them daily, like on the bench, making things, that might be a bit frustrating for me. But for what I use them for, it's actually a benefit. It means I can really get a whole handful of grip. They also have these, I don't know what you'd call them, nodules, grips, which are really good because you can rest your index finger above it. Well, that's how I do it. And, you know, they're not slipping out, especially if you're really going at something in a hammer at the other end of the jaws. It's just really improves grip. Generally, I'm not a fan of the rubber grips. I like to just, I don't know, prefer the feel of the metal. But again, for these, it's perfect because that, when you're hammering something, the vibration from what you're doing, the force, gets dispersed into whatever's surrounding it, including the pliers. So having that rubber grip, for what I use them for, dampens that vibration as well, which I think is brilliant. I don't use them every day because I don't melt up every day necessarily, but I use them every single time I melt up and forge my ingots into like a rough square. Just compress all the molecules in the metal, and for what I'm using them for, they're absolutely perfect. Again, for getting a nice tight fold, again, perfect. 90 degrees, put that right in there, 90 degrees. You would never get that long curve bend, that 90 degree with the snipe nose ones, because of the taper. You know, it's just, if you hold them straight and bend it, your bend's tapered. If you've done one and then wanted to get into the other one, because it's tapered, it would taper even more. It's just really good. Thank you very much.